Peter's failures wasn't the end of his story. On the shore, Jesus met him, not with shame, but with grace. He said, "Follow me." Because he lives, we can face uncertain days with courage and step into a future filled with purpose, restoration, and calling.
It sounds like the plot to a movie, but it was an actual story. It took place October 21st, 1966, in a small Welsh mining town called Oberfan. What started with prolonged and unusually heavy rains caused what became a landslide. And 500,000 tons of mud and debris cascaded down the mountain, overwhelming the small town. Destroyed many homes and also an elementary school. All totaled, 144 people lost their lives, including 116 children. It was one of the worst natural disasters in British history. Shortly after the disaster, reports began to circulate that there was a girl who had a dream a couple of nights before the disaster that disaster was going to take place. So a psychiatrist named John Barker had an idea. From that idea, he formed what became known as the British Premonition Bureau. Now, over the course of the next 18 months, the British Premonition Bureau had one assignment. They interviewed over 1,000 people, and they were trying to determine, can we prevent loss of life from future disasters? So they interviewed 1,000 people over the course of 18 months, and do you know what they discovered? Nothing. Over the next 18 months, they discovered exactly what you think they discovered. You don't know the future. Only God knows the future. There were no natural disasters that were anyway thwarted. There were no loss of life that was somehow thwarted. They disbanded that, and even the book that came out with the same title suggested it was a reasoned approach to the world of unreason. And I read that and I thought, really? What it is an irrational attempt for mankind to try to replace God. Because only God knows the future. Now, you and I know a few things. You've read the book of Revelation. You know some things that are going to happen down the road. And bless God, sometimes God pulls back the curtain and gives us a glimpse of something that is going to happen. This morning, we're going to look at a story of one of those moments when God gave Simon Peter a glimpse of something that God was going to do in Simon's life. It was a moment of uncertainty, so there's no clarity to what Jesus is saying to him, but Peter knows something that is going to happen and some of the circumstances that are going to accompany it. You ever wished you knew what was going to happen tomorrow? You ever wish that you knew that if I do this, this is going to happen, or something's going to happen tomorrow? And if you knew that, would it change how you live today? Peter is given an unusual glimpse of something that God is going to do, left with an uncertain future. And here's what Peter learned, and what you and I are going to learn. We can face uncertain days because he lives. If you have your Bible, I want you to turn with me to the Gospel of John, chapter 21. We're looking at the second half of a story that we began looking at this last Wednesday. In the first part of John chapter 21, the disciples are on the Sea of Galilee and they are fishing. Now, prior to this point, the Lord, after his resurrection, had already appeared several times. He appeared to the women, he appeared to Mary, he appeared to Peter, he appeared to the two on the road to Emmaus, he appeared to the disciples in the upper room when Thomas was not there, and then a week later to the disciples in the upper room when Thomas was there. Then Jesus sent the disciples ahead to Galilee. They made their way to Galilee, to the other side of the country. And Peter said to the other disciples, I'm going fishing. And they said, well, we're going with you. So the Bible records in the first part of John 21, they fished all night and caught nothing. Remember, at least 3 of these were professional fishermen. They fished all night and caught nothing. And then all of a sudden, as dawn began to occur and their eyes still blurry from the long night and the dusk just now turning to dawn, a figure appeared on the shore 100 yards away, and he's speaking to them. Children, you don't have any food, do you? No. Cast your net on the right side of the boat and you'll find some. So they cast their net on the right side of the boat, and all of a sudden now there's this great haul of fish that their nets cannot contain, so heavy they can't even lift it into the boat. Peter hears from John, who calls out, it's the Lord. Peter jumps into the water, swims 100 yards to shore. The other 6 disciples now are left dragging this large net filled with 153 large fish 100 yards to shore. Peter got there before they did, and when they got there, Peter was ready, and so he went and he grabbed the net, and he's dragging this net full of fish to the place where Jesus is, and when he got there, here's what he discovered. Jesus does not need what we bring. He already had fish. He's got a charcoal fire, he's got fish, and he's got bread, and Jesus said, come and eat breakfast. Remarkable scene, Jesus revealing himself again to those disciples. Now, we pick up the story right where that scene left off in John 21, verse 15. Now, when they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? And he said to him, yes, Lord. You know that I love you. And he said, tend my lambs. He said to him again a second time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? He said to him, yes, Lord. You know that I love you. He said to him, shepherd my sheep. He said to him a third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was hurt because he'd said to him a third time, do you love me? And he said, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. And Jesus said to him, tend my sheep. Truly, truly, I say to you, when you were younger, you used to put on your belt and walk wherever you wanted. But when you grow old, you will stretch out your hands. Someone else will put your belt on you and bring you where you do not want to go. Now, he said this, indicating by what kind of death he would glorify God. And when he said this, he said, follow me. Peter turned around, saw the disciple whom Jesus loved following them, the one who also was leaning on his chest at the supper, and said, Lord, who is the one who is betraying you? So Peter, upon seeing him, said to Jesus, Lord, what about that man? Jesus said to him, if I want him to remain until I come, what is that to you? You follow me. Therefore, this account went out among the brothers that the disciple would not die. Yet Jesus did not say to him he would not die, but only if I want him to remain until I come, what is that to you? This is the disciple who's testifying about these things and wrote these things, and we know his testimony is true. There are many other things that Jesus did, which, if they were written in detail, I expect that even the world itself could not contain the books that would be written. I was reading an article this week on Apple's unsend capability. Have you heard about that? You can send a text on your iPhone, and you have a certain amount of time. In fact, Apple says up to 2 minutes, as long as the text is unread, you can unsend the text. That is, you click unsend, and it goes away supposedly on the other person's phone, and they never read it if you can catch it in time. There are even a few email sources that you can send an email, and then maybe you have an instant moment of regret. You send it to the wrong person. You forgot to add an attachment. You regret what you said just seconds after you said it, and you can unsend it. You ever wish you could undo something you did or something you said? Maybe you said something to someone in anger and wish in an instant after the words left your mouth, I wish I could bring them back, or something that you did and you wish in an instant I could take it back. But there is no unsend to things that you say and things that you do. If anyone ever wish they could undo something they did or something that he said, it was Peter right after he denied Jesus 3 times. You remember the moment. By the way, the last time Peter was at a charcoal fire. Same word, only 2 times that word's used in the Gospels. The only other time Peter was at a charcoal fire, remember that little girl came up to him and said, weren't you with Jesus? No. A couple minutes later, she said, no, I recognize you. I'm pretty sure you were with Jesus. And Peter said it more emphatically. No, I don't know him. And then pretty soon, again, you even sound like a person from Galilee. You were with Jesus. And now Peter, with a curse and oath, starts using language that he had not used since he'd been saved. I don't know him. And instantly a rooster crowed, and the Bible tells us that Jesus turned and looked at him. From across the courtyard, they made eye contact, and Peter went away grieved. He's met Jesus since then, but only a few times. You can imagine the guilt is still weighing heavy on Peter's mind as he's fishing. Something that he grew up doing, something he knew. I know how to fish. I've spent 3 years with Jesus. I'm not sure about that, but I know how to fish. So he went back fishing, and he fished all night, and he caught nothing. And there's that scene on the shore as Jesus is there with fish, even as Peter came dragging this net full of 153 fish that they only caught because Jesus told them where to fish. A parable of what Jesus was calling Peter to do. Now, the scene takes a different turn after breakfast. They've eaten breakfast with Jesus, and apparently Jesus ate with them. And there are 2 parts to this encounter. The first part is a question from Jesus to Peter. The second part is a question from Peter to Jesus. And in both of those, we begin to see what the Lord was teaching Peter in a moment of uncertainty. Note, Jesus goes out of his way to find Peter. Some of you here can testify. Jesus has gone out of his way a time or two in your life to find you. Here, the Lord, knowing that Peter is in a moment of weakness, in a moment of sorrow, in a moment of grief and shame, and he goes out of his way across the country to meet Peter on the shore. And ever since Peter's restoration, he's working through the shame and the guilt of his own denial. And now, compounding that, Jesus has a message for Peter of uncertain days that are ahead. And the circumstances remind us of how you and I deal with uncertain days in our lives. Are you facing uncertain days? Hear the testimony of Scripture of how you and I face uncertain days. And in the encounter, we learn, number 1, love him wholeheartedly. The question from Jesus to Peter is fascinating. It's a question that could well be asked of every believer in Jesus Christ. Do you love me? When the religious leaders were trying to trick Jesus, do you remember the question that they asked him? What is the greatest commandment? And without hesitation, Jesus said, the greatest commandment is this: you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and all your strength. That's the greatest commandment. Now, Jesus came to Peter, and he asked him not one time, not two times, but three times, "Do you love me?" Same number of times Peter denied him. "I don't know him. I don't know him. I don't know him." Matched by the threefold refrain of Jesus, "Do you love me? Do you love me? Do you love me?" And you hear the weight of this moment and the grace of his restoration. Can you imagine, had this moment not happened, every time for the rest of his life Peter heard a rooster crow, the guilt would come back. Now all of a sudden, in God's grace, he meets Peter at a moment of his need and restores him. "Do you love me more than these?" That's the first question Jesus asked. There are three subtly different questions. The first is, "Do you love me more than these?" Now, scholars have all kinds of fun with the word "these" in that sentence, and there are really two primary theories that could mean. It could be that Jesus was saying, "Do you love me more than all of these other disciples? Do you love me more than them?" After all, Peter said, "Even if everybody else denies you, I will never deny you." Do you love me more than they do? It could be that Jesus was pointing to all the apparatus, the fishing, the nets, the fish, the boat that belonged to Peter. And Jesus might have been saying, referring to that old lifestyle, "Do you love me more than that old lifestyle, which you spent all night trying to do on your own without me? Do you love me more?" This, referring to the quantity of Peter's love for Jesus, is your love for me greater than your love for all of these other things in your life? So fill in the blank in your life, whatever these things are in your life. Do you love Jesus more than that? Do you love Jesus more than your family? Do you love Jesus more than your occupation? Do you love Jesus more than the thing that you are best at in life? Do you love me more? The second question is a little bit more intensified as Jesus now probing a little bit deeper. He's already said, "Do you love me more than these?" But now we learn there's a grammatical issue in the story that actually gets to the quality of Peter's love for Jesus. The first question is the quantity of his love. Do you love me more? But as you look deeper, there's a grammatical issue, and if you've looked at this passage before, you've studied it, you perhaps know that there are really two Greek words that are being used here for the word love, and we realize that Peter might not be answering the question that Jesus asked. Because Jesus used a word for love that's different than the word that Peter used for love. Jesus used the word agape, which is the word that refers to the kind of love that God has for us, an unconditional kind of love. And what Jesus is asking Peter, "Do you love me like God loves you?" Peter's response substitutes a different word. Peter uses the word phileo, which is where we get our English word Philadelphia, city of brotherly love. It means what you think it means. It's a brotherly kind of love. I like you a lot. And when Jesus asked Peter, "Do you love me with an unconditional love?" Peter's response was, "I like you a lot." "Do you love me more than these?" "I like you." "Do you love me?" "I like you." The first, the quantity of his love. The second, the quality of his love. The third, most piercing. Now, in his third question, Jesus substitutes the word agape for the word that Peter had previously used, phileo. And in the third time Jesus asked the question was, "Do you even like me? Do you love me more than these?" "I like you." "Do you love me?" "I like you." "Do you like me?" Now the Bible says Peter's grieved, not just because he's asked it a third time, but because he's now substituted. Now he's getting down to the heart of Peter's affection, because what Jesus was asking Peter was, do you have for me a love of devotion? Peter's response was, I have for you a love of emotion. Do you love me? I like you a lot. I'm afraid sometimes, perhaps even to our shame, when we say the words, I love the Lord, I wonder sometimes if what we mean is, I like him a lot. Because the word love implies a deeper kind of commitment. If you say, I love God, I love Jesus, I love the Lord, what you're saying is, he is my highest goal. He is my greatest affection. I love him more than anything. I love him more than everything. I love him. If I have nothing, I love him. But if you just like him, it becomes more easy to turn away from him when circumstances are uncertain. If I just like Jesus, then I can turn away when things go bad. If I just like Jesus, I can do my own thing when what he is doing disagrees with what I think he ought to be doing. If I just like Jesus, I set the terms. If I love him, he sets the terms. The Lord is reminding us something that is significant in all of our lives. Do you love him wholeheartedly? Because if you and I are going to face uncertain days in our lives, it is going to require a kind of love that is deeper than just an emotional experience you have with him. Do you love him deeply? Peter is refreshingly honest. And he says, Lord, you know all things. You know I like you. What I like is that the Lord doesn't rebuke Peter for his lack of love. It's almost as though Jesus is saying, okay, Peter, let's start there. You like me. And from that, there'll be a relationship that will be built. From that, there'll be a more devoted encounter that will come from this. But at this moment, Jesus and Peter both know the depth of Peter's love. I can say I love Jesus and maybe persuade others around me, but at the end of the day, the Lord knows my heart. And he knows if I love him, if I just like him a lot. So step one, if I'm going to walk through uncertain days, is to love him wholeheartedly. Step two, serve him obediently. Jesus has already restored Peter privately. The Bible does not give us any details about that. It records it twice, but tells us nothing about it. Jesus met Peter. Jesus restored Peter. So this moment in John 21 is not Peter's restoration. It is Peter's reinstatement into ministry. Because in each of those three times when Jesus said, do you love me? And Peter said, I like you a lot, Peter responded with a mission statement. If you love me, or even if you just like me, then there's something I want for you to do, and that is to serve me. And the Lord even outlines the responsibilities that are assigned to Peter. Peter, do you love me? I like you. Tend my lambs. Peter, do you love me? I like you. Shepherd my sheep. Peter, do you like me? Lord, I like you. Tend my sheep. It is now the renewed assignment that the Lord has given to Peter again. There was a public denial. There is now a public restoration. Jesus said, if you deny me before men, I will deny you before my Father. But if you confess me before men, I will confess you before my Father. And now before all these other disciples, before whom he had previously denied him, Jesus now reinstates Peter, and Peter now realizing the depth of his love. Every once in a while, someone will ask me, as a pastor, what is it that you do? Some of you are looking at me and you're thinking, I've never asked that, but I'd sure like to know. What is it that pastors do? I get what you do, at 11:30 on Sunday morning, but what is it that you do? Typically, I'll refer them back to this moment because Jesus uses two words to describe to Peter what is his responsibility. He is to feed the sheep and he is to tend them. This is what shepherds do. You feed the sheep, you take care of them. This now becomes not just metaphorically what is Peter's responsibility, it is exactly what the Lord is calling Peter to do. Because remember, the last time Peter fished all night and caught nothing in Luke chapter 5 was the moment where God called him, where Jesus set Peter aside as a disciple and then finished that occasion by saying, "Now on, you are a fisher of men." And now, Jesus reminding Peter of that moment. Remember that last time you fished all night and caught nothing? The instructions are the same. Feed my sheep. Tend my lambs. If you love me, Jesus said, then serve me. It becomes the unavoidable response to anyone who loves Jesus. If I love him, I serve him. If I love him, I do his will. If I love him, I relinquish my will, my plans to serve his will and his plans. If you love me, Jesus said, then feed my sheep. Just a few days from this moment, Peter will be standing before a multitude preaching the gospel, extending to them the very thing God in Jesus Christ is extending to him in this moment, the grace of God to cover his sin. If you love me, serve me. Here's the point. Loving Jesus demands it. It means caring for his sheep. It means sacrificing your will. Love compels us to service. It was his love for the flock that led Jesus to provide for them a shepherd. And it was his grace for Peter that did not disqualify him when he sinned. Here, the compassion of Jesus: tend my sheep. Take care of my flock. They're mine, Peter. I'm just entrusting you with the responsibility of taking care of them. We heard that same heart of Jesus on the cross when Jesus looked down and the only disciple that was there was John, the author of this gospel. And Jesus said to John, "Take care of my mama." And now Jesus saying to Peter, "I'm entrusting you with the care of my sheep." Love him wholeheartedly. Serve him obediently. There's a third lesson we learn in this story about facing uncertain days, and that is that we follow him sacrificially. Follow on in the story. Jesus has now 3 times asked Peter, "Do you love me?" And Peter's responded 3 times, I'm pretty sure I like you a lot. But now the story picks up in verse 18. Jesus now speaking, "Truly, truly, I tell you, when you were younger, you used to put on your own belt and walk wherever you wanted to go, but when you grow old, you will stretch out your hands. Someone else will put your belt on you, and they will bring you where you do not want to go." There's going to come a time, Peter, when the circumstances are going to be different. John knows that. John, the writer of the gospel, who was standing there when this took place, he says in verse 19, the reason Jesus said this is because he was indicating the kind of death with which Peter would glorify God. Now, it had to be a little bit of a moment of comfort for Peter. At least Peter knows, I've seen a little bit of the end. I fast forwarded to the end, and I'm going to die serving Jesus. Jesus said, John 15:13, greater love has no man than this, that he laid down his life for his friends. Peter, there's going to come a day you're going to lay down your life for me. On the other hand, it had to be a little bit frightening to hear that word, right? When you were younger, Peter, you did whatever you wanted to do. Put on your belt, go wherever you want to go. There's going to come a day you're going to stretch out your hands. Somebody's going to tie them up with your belt, and they're going to take you where you don't want to go. And the fear of that uncertainty must have sunk in Peter's mind as he begins to realize what Jesus is saying to me is there's an uncertainty about my future. There's a fearfulness that is coming. Something's going to happen. I don't know what it is, but something's going to happen. It's the same thing happened in Acts chapter 9 at the moment where Paul was brought to faith in Jesus Christ, and God sent a disciple named Ananias and said to him, I want you to go tell Paul what he's going to suffer for me. Whether or not Peter fully understood it, that's what Jesus was doing for Peter. You're going to suffer for me. But don't worry. You can face uncertain days. I want you to love me. I want you to serve me. And then Jesus said, I want you to follow me. Because right after that, note the end of verse 19. John says, Jesus said this to describe the kind of death with which Peter would glorify God. And after he said this, Jesus said to Peter, follow me. I know there's uncertainty. Follow me. I know you don't know all the answers to the questions. Follow me. I want you to follow me unconditionally. It doesn't matter what happens. It doesn't matter what certain uncertainties might come. Do not be anxious about tomorrow. Tomorrow has enough worries of its own. You follow me. I know, look, the closer you get to the end of the chapter, the temptation is to fast forward to the end to see how it ends. But you and I don't know the end. Follow me. Love him with all your heart. Serve him obediently. Then Jesus says to him, I want you to follow me. But then there's one final word of advice that God gave to Peter. That is, I want you to trust me unconditionally. Trust him. What do I do when I face those moments of uncertainty? You trust him. What do I do when I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow? You trust him. Now follow what happens right after this, because apparently when Jesus said the words in the last part of verse 19, follow me, Peter thought Jesus was asking Peter to go for a walk. And so they begin walking down the shore. We know they're walking down the shore because Peter turns around and he sees John standing there. So that's the scene. Jesus has just said, I want you to follow me. Now verse 20, Peter turns around. He saw the disciple whom Jesus loved following him. That's John, the author of the gospel. The one who leaned on his chest at the supper and said, Lord, who is it who's betraying you? John's identifying himself. That's me. I was the guy walking a little bit behind Peter. Peter turned around, saw John standing there, and here's what Peter said. And you hear a little of Peter's Peterishness coming back. Lord, what about that guy? Does he have some uncertain future ahead? Somebody going to take him where he doesn't want to go? Are you going to ask him if he loves you more than I love you? Why aren't you talking to John instead of just talking to me? He's kind of trying to divert the conversation, right? Can we talk about John for a minute? Can we talk about his faults? Can we talk about things about John? I'd like to, I'd like to change the conversation. And here's what Jesus said to Peter. Peter, that's none of your business. It's as nicely as I can phrase what Jesus is saying to Peter. He said, Peter, that's not your concern. If I want him to remain until I come, what is that to you? If I want him to stay alive until I come back. Now, there's a funny moment, and John reflects on that right after this. John says, look, the reason right after Jesus said that, there was this rumor that began to spread that John's never going to die. And it didn't help that John was the last of the disciples to live. And so there's this rumor circulating, John's never going to die, because Jesus just said to Peter, if I want him to remain until I come, what is that to you? But John says, look, that's not what Jesus said. What he said was, if I want him to remain, what is that to you? The key is what Jesus wants, right? If I want that, it's none of your business what I do in John's life. It's none of your business how I work in his life, what I'm doing in his life. I'm talking to you, Peter. You, follow me. We love to be concerned about everybody else's business, right? What about that person? We compare ourselves with that person. We love hearing stories about their lives, especially the juicy stories. We love to be concerned about everybody else's business. But hear what Jesus is saying to Peter. Peter, I'm not talking to you about John. I'll deal with John alone. I'm talking to you, Peter. And if I want him to remain until I come again, what business of that is yours? I've given you an instruction. You follow me. The you there in verse 22 is emphatic. You follow me. You hear those words resonating, echoing down through the centuries, applying in our own lives. Can you hear Jesus pointing the finger? Can you see it in your mind? You follow me. Doesn't matter what I'm doing in everybody else's life. You follow me. What is the depth of your commitment to him? What is the picture of your trust? There's a scene in Acts chapter 1, verse 6. We'll look at it in just a few weeks in the final encounter in this series. But in that scene, Jesus is about to ascend to the Father, and the disciples know something's about to happen. And so somebody says, Lord, is this the moment you're going to restore Israel to its prominence? And Jesus said, that's not for you to know. It's not your business. What about him? What about that person? No, you follow me. Well, what if this person that I'm thinking about doesn't follow you, Lord? You follow me. What if nobody at my work follows you, Jesus? You follow me. What if other people don't do the things that I think they ought to do, Lord? No, you follow me. And here Jesus now reinstating the same instructions he gave Peter when he called him. I want you to follow me. The message hasn't changed. Your sin did not change it. Look, I know what you did. We all saw it. Is Jesus overlooking Peter's sin? No. He's reminding him he just paid for it. I know what you did. Follow me. I know who you are. Follow me. Follow me no matter what the future holds. Follow me no matter what others do. Follow me no matter what the difficulties are. I know who you are. I know the sin of your life, and I've already paid for it. You follow me. And I would remind you, your sin does not turn him away from you. He died for it so that you'd love him and you'd serve him and you'd follow him and you would trust him. Here again, you follow me. In that second verse to the song that we've been singing for the last several weeks, Because He Lives, do you remember the words to that song? How sweet to hold a newborn baby. Do you remember that? How sweet to hold a newborn baby and feel the pride and joy he gives. Remember that? Let me tell you what every parent knows, even if they don't verbalize it. In that moment, when you hold that newborn baby, you've got pride and joy on the one hand. On the other hand, you're holding this baby, and you remember the world is a very dangerous place. And somehow those conflicting emotions begin to wage war in your mind, the pride and the joy of a gift that God's given you and the uncertainty of a future that I don't know what's going to happen in this child. But here's the truth. This child can face uncertain days because he lives. And so can you. Are you facing uncertain days? Are you facing sorrow? You can face it. Because he lives. Are you facing fear? You can face it. Are you facing financial issues? You can face it. Are you facing family issues? You can face it because He lives.